What's up, weirdo? Shade Tree Surgeon here, and you know what? Lately we've been doing a lot of feel-good, happy, touchy-feely type stuff on the channel. Teaching people how to ride motorcycles, celebrating our friends' achievements. We've lived, we've laughed, we've loved. And I've had it about up to here with that crapola. It's time to go back to our roots. Let's piss some people off. And what better way to piss people off than an arbitrary ranking of inanimate objects? That just drives people wild. So welcome to the top 5 greatest muscle bikes of all time. Now, believe it or not, these aren't my arbitrary opinions that dictated the order of the bikes on this list. They're yours. I recently posted on Instagram and Facebook asking all my followers on there to list their top picks for the greatest muscle bikes of all time. I tallied up all the answers that I got, and trust me, there was a very clear winner. As with other videos that I've done like this, I asked for people to vote with their hearts, because motorcycles, they're about so much more than the sum of their parts. They're so much more than a line of numbers on a spec sheet. And no style of motorcycles is more driven by emotion and heart than muscle bikes. After all, muscle bikes are less of a category and more of an attitude. I mean, really, how do you even define what a muscle bike is? Sure, when you say the words muscle bike, a certain kind of motorcycle springs to mind, usually some sort of overpowered cruiser, but there are plenty of non-cruiser motorcycles that still fall into the muscle bike category. For example, the Honda VTX 1800 is absolutely a muscle bike. It was a pretty standard looking cruiser which at the time of its release had the largest production V-twin ever put into a motorcycle, so it was a muscle bike. Now on the complete other end of the spectrum, I feel like you could make a very good argument to also include the Kawasaki H2 in the muscle bike category. The H2 is technically listed as a super sport, but let's be real here, this bike is not in the same class as the R1 or the CBR 1000. I'm not saying it's in a better class, it's just in a different class. The kind of class where everybody's sneaking behind the dumpster to get stoned and spraying graffiti on the bathroom walls. Sure, the H2 might be dressed up in super sport clothes, but it ain't one of them. What it is just a giant supercharged middle finger to every other sport bike out there. It's the third option, the choice for people who want something that's just a little bit different, that's a little more raw, a little more dangerous. Muscle bikes, in my opinion anyway, are motorcycles that defy the boundaries of their category and just piss all over the idea of what they're supposed to be. And yes, the aforementioned defiance and iteration is usually exemplified by an outlandish experimental engine that makes ungodly horsepower, which is then crammed into a motorcycle that looks like it came out of a freak show. Cruiser, sport bike, naked standard, like I said before, you can usually take any muscle bike and put it in a standard class, but it's usually the kid standing out in the hallway. But that's enough waxing poetic about what a muscle bike is. Let's get into this list. First off, I want to give some honorable mentions to the Harley Davidson FXDR, the Honda Valkyrie, and the Honda VTX. All three of those bikes had great showings and they all actually got within one vote of each other, but they did all have less than half the votes of the lowest ranked motorcycle in the top 5. They're all awesome examples of muscle bikes and got enough votes that I wanted to give them honorable mentions here. And on a personal note, I would have actually rated the Honda Valkyrie much higher on my own personal list because I've always had kind of a soft spot for those bikes. Also, I gotta say that I was completely shocked that the Suzuki M109 didn't make the top 5 list, although it did come within a few votes of being the number 5. And without further ado, I give you the top 5 greatest muscle bikes of all time, as decided by you. Coming in at number 5, the Honda Magna. Powered by a V4 engine that borrowed technology from Honda's Superbike program, the Honda Magna was way ahead of its time in the 80s. Honda also used that same V4 engine in the Interceptor Sport touring bike and the sportier version of the Magna, the V65 Sabre. Hell man, the V65 is still fast by today's standards. I think a lot of people are going to be kind of upset that the Honda Magna didn't score higher on this list, but to be honest with you, I'm really not surprised by that. And that's mainly because the Magna name was just slapped on so many different bikes. They made smaller displacement V45 Magnas, and hell, they even made a 500cc version, the V30. And although a lot of people love the bike, do it with Dan being one of them, the name really got even further diluted when they released the VF750 in the 90s. Whereas the original Magna, the V65, it had a style all its own. The Magna they came out with in the 90s, the VF750, honestly, it was just another Harley lookalike. Hell man, by the end of its life, Honda was even slapping the Magna name on 250cc V-twin beginner bikes. So when you have a name that's spread out across so many different motorcycles, you really gotta admit that the Honda Magna V65, the V65 is the bike that carried the Magna name onto this list. And man, I would love to see Honda bring that one back. Taking the fourth spot, actually really to my surprise, was the Ducati Diavel. I'm not saying it doesn't deserve to be on this list, I just didn't expect it. But of course, nobody expects the Diavel. A cruiser from Ducati? That's like ordering tater tots and a hamburger from a Michelin-rated restaurant. Yeah, you're a man of simple pleasures, a meat and potatoes type of guy. Except your burger's made out of ground Wagyu beef and your tater tots are fried in duck fat. The Ducati Diavel is to cruisers what the Mercedes AMG G-Wagon is to SUVs. It's on a whole other level and it wants everyone to know it. Taking the bronze on this list is everybody's favorite red-headed stepchild, the Harley Davidson VRod. In my opinion, the VRod exemplifies exactly what a muscle bike should be. Sure, it says Harley Davidson on the tank, and yes, it had a V-twin, and boy did Harley love to throw chrome at those things, but honestly, that's where it stops. The VRod had a radical water-cooled double overhead camshaft V-twin that was designed by Porsche. It made 120 plus horsepower, it revved to over 9,000 RPM, and even though Harley Davidson discontinued the VRod, it would put any brand new Harley's dick in the dirt with extreme prejudice. Hell, in comparison, the FXDR, Harley's current muscle bike option, only makes about 90 horsepower. Depending on who you ask, the VRod was either the best looking Harley ever made or it looked like the wrong end of a dog. Personally, I think the VRod is ugly as sin, but then, you know what, baby? I'm a sinner. Unfortunately, that off-the-wall styling and that absolutely insane motor that made the VRod so special is also what spelled its demise, because Harley went ahead and gave the thing the axe in 2018. Coming in at number 2 by a very narrow margin, it actually only beat the VRod by 9 votes. It's the fan favorite, the Triumph Rocket 3. I will say I'm actually very relieved that the Rocket 3 didn't take the top spot on this list because I never would have heard the end of it. For those of you watching who don't know, my personal motorcycle is actually a Triumph Rocket 3, so it would have looked kind of fishy if it took the top spot. And call me biased if you want, I certainly am, but I believe that no top 5 muscle bike list at all would ever be complete without including the Triumph Rocket 3. As I've said on the channel many times before, twisting the throttle wide open on a modified Rocket 3, it's a downright religious experience. And I ain't talking about the man upstairs. This motorcycle serves a different master. At 2300 cc's, the Triumph Rocket 3 used to have the largest production engine ever put into a motorcycle, but very sadly it lost its crown when Triumph came out with another Rocket 3 at 2500 cc's. The king is dead, long live the king. Drumroll, please, taking the #1 spot by a veritable landslide, with over 20% more votes than the #2 motorcycle on this list. You guys have voted the greatest muscle bike of all time to be the Yamaha VMAX. You know what, dude? Even though Honda stuffed a big old V4 in the Magna before Yamaha ever came out with the VMAX, the Max, that's the bike that everybody remembers. Whereas the Magna name got diluted and eventually petered out into chrome pastures, the Yamaha VMAX remained essentially unchanged from 1985 to 2007. And even at 22 years old, that bike still dominated. The updated version of the VMAX literally does everything better than the original, but for my money, the original Max just can't be beat. Just the whole look of the bike with that big V4 engine just hanging out in the breeze like a nutsack, and those big scoops on the side that, holy moly, were actually functional. Not to mention what was probably the absolute coolest exhaust note to ever come out of a motorcycle, in my opinion anyway.
Good.
Even the name, VMAX, it just sounds badass. As a kid, the VMAX, that was the bike that was on the poster that was thumbtacked to my wall, and still, to this day, I would absolutely love to own one. There are faster motorcycles, there are better looking motorcycles, there are better handling motorcycles, there are plenty of bikes that do all sorts of things much better than the VMAX does, but if you ask me, it 100% deserves the #1 spot on this list. And you know what? I think that the Yamaha VMAX could easily find its way on any list of the greatest motorcycles of all time. So there you have it, the top 5 greatest muscle bikes of all time, according to you. Hey man, maybe you don't agree with it. Hell, I don't exactly agree with it completely myself. I definitely would have ranked the Suzuki M109 and the Honda Valkyrie higher, but then again, it's really hard to imagine which bike on this top 5 list that they'd knock out. I'd love to know what your #1 pick is, so be sure to let me know in the comments down below. Everyone seems to like these videos, so I'll definitely be doing more of them. And if you want to participate in the voting process, make sure to follow me on Instagram at shadetree. I'll also have a link to that in the description. And finally, if you like this video, make sure to leave a like on it, hit that subscribe button, share the video with somebody else, and till next time, y'all, keep it weird.